try to set you up here. Let's see, you're on a laundry basket. Hang tight. All right, there we go. Don't move. Hey friends, as you can see, there's not gonna be a vlog this week. It's just gonna be more of like a life update, how things are. As you can tell from the title, I started Zoloft, so we'll kind of go through that whole journey and like talk about a little bit about anxiety and a little bit about everything that's been going on. Everything is fine. This is mostly just to be like, hey, if you're feeling this too, you're not the only one. Chat about that a little bit. Just, you know, a little bit of a life update. I tried to do it vlog last week and it didn't work out, so we're just gonna do it this way. And yeah, if you guys normally watch these with littles, maybe this way might be the one to skip for that. I mean, I'm not gonna just start randomly swearing all the time. You know, the content's a little bit different than it normally is. But with that said, let's just dive into all feelings. Except this won't be a bummer. This isn't gonna be like a bring you down type of thing. It's gonna be more of like a walk this experience type of thing with me. There won't be tears, is what I'm trying to say. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Liz. I'm a family nurse practitioner, and usually I make weekly vlogs about my life inside and out of work as that, and that's usually where these go, is on Saturday if you're watching this in real time, and later, well, that doesn't matter to you at all. And then content videos on Tuesdays about all sorts of random stuff. But today is a little bit different because I wanted to talk just kind of like a little bit about mental health. I feel like no one ever talks about that. And so here we are. You guys know I don't shy away from all sorts of topics. So here we go. I thought I would just kind of talk about, if you guys have been watching the vlogs lately, I think you've been able to pick up on the vibe that like work is just really, really hard. So I work in primary care if you're very new. And it's just been really disastrous with coronavirus. And if you've watched, I've kind of devolved into just sadness over the last couple of weeks. And I've been very honest with, I feel like, saying to you guys, like, I've been monitoring how I've been feeling. And like having good days versus bad days, I'll write it down in a journal. I'm not good at journaling at all, guys. I wish. That's one of those things that I just wish I could be better at, but I'm not. But I do write down in my journal, good day or bad day. And I figured when I kind of tipped the scales and was having more bad days than good days, then maybe we would have to reevaluate. And we very much hit that very rapidly, I would say about 2-ish, 3 weeks ago. And I found myself, I was crying every day when I was going into work. I was just sad and anxious, and we'll talk more about like how I was feeling in a minute, but the scales tipped. And I realized I wasn't feeling great, which I feel like you could probably get a sense of that if you've been watching the vlogs lately. They've just been sad, and I always want to keep this like kind of realistic of how I'm feeling. So that's why I thought we would talk about it today. Not a lot of people like to talk about this. People are fine with talking about all sorts of other health conditions, but when it comes to mental health, it just seems kind of taboo. You know, I don't hold back a lot, so I will be that person. I'll share it. And also I'm sharing it I'm not in any way sharing any of this to get like, to be like, oh, like this is so hard. Like things are even now, like they're starting to get better. It's more just to hopefully make you feel like you're not alone, because as I've been sharing in my daily recaps on Instagram, I share a lot of, like what I see during the day, and I've gotten a lot of it's been anxiety from my patients, and I've gotten so many messages saying like, that's been so helpful to see, because I feel that too with this pandemic and everything going on, or just life in general. And it's so reassuring to see like I'm not the only one struggling with that. So that is why this video exists. It might be kind of rambly because one of the side effects is kind of making me of Zoloft is that I'm like, the anxiousness is cranked up a little bit. So I'm like kind of jumbled in my brain. So this won't be like the most organized video, but it'll be honest. So that's why I'm making it, just so that if any of you out there are feeling like, oh wow, I'm feeling super anxious or sad or anything, that you are not alone, that this is life is just crazy. It doesn't need to be in the middle of a pandemic, and it's okay to talk about it. It's not your fault. The chemicals in your brain are just a little bit off at the moment, and there's something to fix that. So let's get started. I thought I would just kind of explain like how I've been feeling, and then what the plan is going forward. I promise this won't be like insanely long like some of my rambles can be. So over the last little while, mostly with like the pandemic and stress at work and everything, as I said, you can probably see, it's just been getting harder and harder at work. There's been a lot of people just like yell at me all day because they have to wear masks when they're in the office and they don't think coronavirus is real. And going between the dichotomy of talking with a lot of patients whose loved ones have died of coronavirus or who are like really suffering from all sorts of the effects of like hospitalizations and just everything related to it, and then going into the next room and having the person swear at you because they have to wear a mask and they don't think coronavirus is real, and everyone is just like mad at me all the time for a million things. I live in an area that not a lot of people think it's real, and they like to call me names for thinking that it does exist, and it has just gotten to me. I found myself crying every day before I went into work, and that was, I mean, that's just brutal. That reminded me of when I was a brand new nurse, and I just cried going into work every day because it was hard, and probably should have taken some kind of medication back then too, but I didn't have that forethought. But it was just hard, and I was sad, and for a little while it was just that. It was just before I was going to work, and it was just on the days that I would go into work, and then on my days off I was like, oh, this is I'm fine. Like, I really am fine. And then I started to, so I have a history, the only time I've really had like anxiety, depression, which really only was depression, was postpartum depression after my first daughter was born. I've never had anxiety, and after like a week or two of crying every day before I go into work, I started to have like, I felt nervous all the time, very, very anxious, very fidgety, very unsettled. Like my heart was pounding, just very nervous and really irritable. And it was starting to happen on days where I wasn't working, starting to be worried about all sorts of things. Like I was imagining like worst case scenarios of everything. I was fearful of horrible things happening to my children. That's like totally irrational things. Very, very irritable. Couldn't focus on anything. Like very just like stressed. And then one day, probably like 3 weeks ago, in the middle of the day, I was having such bad chest pain, like, and shortness of breath that I was convinced I had coronavirus. And I mean, don't do this. This is not like my medical advice to you, but legitimately the only way I could think to tell, like, do I have coronavirus or am I having something sort of resembling like a panic attack? I don't know if I wouldn't call it a panic attack, but because I could function and like logic through it. I've never had one, so I don't know. Maybe it was. I should probably know that as a healthcare provider. But like I had to like sit down, you know what I mean? I was like breathing really heavy. The only thing I knew to do, again, don't do this. This is not medical advice. I was trying to figure out like, is this coronavirus related? Like, am I all of a sudden getting really sick? Which doesn't make sense as a presentation of it, but it's fine. Was to have a drink. So I was like, it's like noon. Again, don't judge me, and don't do this. And it calmed it down immediately. Not the way to treat your anxiety, but mine was kind of like a case test. But after that did calm it down and like I could take a couple deep breaths and feel calmer. I was like, okay, like the fact that you just needed to have a little glass of wine at noon on a random day, like a Saturday, something is wrong, self. And that really was kind of my like wake up call moment. Normally I have like, you know, a glass or two of wine a week in the evening, just like because it tastes good. And that is obviously, I do not condone or want to be someone who drinks alcohol in order to like stabilize a mood. And so that was like an enormous red flag for me, but I was glad I didn't have coronavirus. I was like, well, that's one way to figure that out. But after that, I kind of talked to my husband and I like ran it by him. I was like, do you think I've been more like irritable, sad? And like, before I could even really get the sentence out, he was like, yeah. I was like, okay. And I was like, so I was thinking of maybe it's time that I'm not handling this very well and I should start some Zoloft. And before, like as soon as I said that, he's like, yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I talked to some of my other family members about it. And I was like, I was thinking of starting like, maybe like going back on this. And they were like, yep. And I was like, okay. So interestingly too, that like my family had seen it a lot. They're like, yeah, like you are not well, like doing well. Before even like I saw it, which I mean, I feel like is pretty typical. But the anxiety this time was like so overwhelming. I did have some like depression symptoms. Like I felt very sad and bad about myself. Like I wasn't like good at anything and everything was like my fault. But mostly it was just anxiety, like horrible horrible anxiety. So I made the appointment. Meanwhile, with all of this, like I was making sure I was exercising a lot. That was something I incorporated when I started seeing like the symptoms of this coming back. Was I was riding the Peloton every other day and doing yoga on the other days. So like every day I was doing something. We walk for like half an hour in the evening. I was trying to eat a lot better. I hadn't been eating any like junk food, drinking lots of water. I was doing a meditation app on my phone because, you know, you're cutting out caffeine. I was only having like a small, like half a cup of coffee in the morning to see it, just to like function, to see if that would reduce any of it. So I was doing all the things that I could think of to try to making sure I was sleeping, like getting 8 hours of sleep, you know, like all the things where I would tell a patient, like, this is what you should do. I had been doing those things for weeks and it's helpful, but I mean, those symptoms were still there. So I made the appointment with my healthcare provider, and the other thing I did was I scored myself because I really was hesitant still with all of this going on to start medication, you know, which is always just funny because patients come to me all the time and they're very, very hesitant to want to start anything. And for me, I'm always like, you know, it's okay. Like, this is okay. It's just a chemical imbalance, but it's so different when it's like you as when it's me, you know? And I kind of had to, after that incident, like sit myself down and be like, Liz, like, it's a chemical imbalance. You're doing all the things. And even if you didn't like have the ability at the moment to do all the things, like, it's a chemical imbalance. And sometimes even if you're doing all those other things, like, that's just not quite enough. This doesn't have to even be forever. And it's okay. And I like finally kind of wrapped my mind around it, and I was like, okay, like, you're right. Like, I was giving myself kind of the, Joe kind of my husband gave me the advice to look at myself, because I was telling him I'm hesitant about all this. And he was like, what would you pretend you're your own patient. So I did the GAD-7, the generalized anxiety score on myself, and I scored I was like 1 point away from the maximum score, which is, I mean, this is not like a game where you want to get the highest score. So that was pretty telling. That's like severe anxiety on that scale. And then like mild depression on the PHQ-9. And so when I did that and kind of looked at overall everything else, I was like, if someone like was explaining all of that to me and was in my office, I wouldn't even hesitate to offer them, you know, like be like, hey, I really think this might help. So I kind of like sat with that for a little, and then obviously made the appointment and started Zoloft. I am breastfeeding and plan on continuing that. So Zoloft was really my option. That's kind of the tried and true one with breastfeeding. I did have a little bit of hesitancy just because I am breastfeeding, and I was like, like, you know, there's research around it saying like it is safe, but you know, like anything like that, you're still just like, I don't know. But I was interestingly scanning something like randomly. I've been off of social media a lot because it's been stressful for me, but the one thing I randomly did see was this post from, somewhere, and it was saying like, your kids don't care if your house is clean or if all this other stuff, they're not gonna at the end of the day remember that. They're gonna remember if their mom was happy. And that like hit me like, oh, I'm gonna get emotional. That's gonna make me emotional thinking about. And I was like, wow, like I don't probably seem, if my whole family is looking at me and being like, yep, like something needs to change, I'm not happy. And I think it's worth, you know, taking a little bit of Zoloft if I need to like my daughter will be better served by me being happy and maybe having the introduction of something like Zoloft versus, you know, not having anything. So I started that. Brief tangent aside here, and then we'll talk about the side effects that I'm having right now because whoa. But with all of that, I just want to say too that it can be, I've really had to stay away from social media a lot lately and mute a ton of accounts, honestly, because a lot of the messaging out there regarding like mental health, anxiety, depression, really anything is that you can kind of power through it with lifestyle changes. And I've seen a lot of people being like, oh, I'm ditching my anxiety medicine and I'm like doing all of this and you don't need this. And I feel like any other type of content surrounding this is kind of like, oh, like I thought about maybe trying to take a medicine, but like I'm just gonna power through it with like my diet and exercise and meditation and all that stuff. And all of that stuff is really helpful. And I'm not knocking, like, if that's going to work for you, then that's perfect. But I just feel like that also emits a huge message of like, it's okay to take medication if you need it, that all the meditation in the world probably isn't going to make those chemicals in my brain tolerate the chaos that I'm dealing with in life right now that's making me really anxious and sad. I could exercise 3 times a day and it probably wouldn't do it. And I think all of that just kind of sends a message of shame that if you can't exercise your way out of your sadness and stress, like, what's wrong with you? You know, look at me, I'm doing it. So that's my message to you, is you can't always exercise and meditate and yoga your way out of your brain chemicals being a little bit out of whack. And it's okay if you need a little Zoloft or something else to sprinkle in there and even things out. I'm right there with you, friend. And we're gonna get there eventually. It will be okay. Like, there's nothing shameful about it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. You're not the only one. I promise you, you are not the only one. And there's my soapbox on that, because I feel like everywhere I've looked on social media, it's just been people like touting that they're coming off of their Zoloft or their, you know, this has been such a challenging time. And so I've found that like self-care and meditating has like eliminated my anxiety, as I'm like hyperventilating and having, you know, a moment over here feeling like endless anxious thoughts that are tormenting me. And all of that's not working. So if that's you, it's okay. If you're doing those things and it absolutely helps, I'm not knocking at all that those things help. I do think all those things help. And I think it's really important to implement them because it's like a combined effort. Just like therapy actually is recommended. Like, therapy in conjunction with medication is the best. Therapy is a little bit too pricey at this exact moment. Yay, insurance. But in a perfect world, we would incorporate that as well. But you know, like, all the things are helpful. And I'm not knocking it if you're someone who's really benefited from just doing those things, but I'm also just being the voice of the people who I feel very targeted when I see that. I won't lie. Like, I feel like I've had a lot of like, well, why am I not good enough? Like, why can't that fix it for me? And I've just kind of tried to come around that and be like, it's okay that it doesn't. A little bit of Zoloft sprinkled in, it's gonna be fine. Anyway, off of that soapbox, now that that tangent's over, let's talk a little bit about side effects. I feel like this has been a glimpse into menopause, what it's gonna be like. And Joe gets to see a little bit into the future, and I think he's terrified. So if you are unaware, when you start most SSRIs, Zoloft is an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Actually, with most antidepressants and anti-anxiety medicines, the beginning is really not fun. It, especially Zoloft and other SSRIs, they amplify your symptoms, especially of anxiety, at first. So they make it worse before it's gonna get better. This is something you should always educate your patients on because otherwise they're going to run and be like, what is happening? So that's actually why this video is happening now, because last week I tried to film and I couldn't even like put a sentence to, like, it. I was watching it back. I was like, this can't be public. That's not okay. I was just all over the place in my mind, and it was not a good week. But anyway, side effects. In the first week, my anxiety got a lot worse. Almost like mania, but without the energy. It was just like my thoughts weren't really connecting super well. I was very jittery. I couldn't stay on task with anything. I was like hopping from like one thing to another. I was fidgety. I could not sit still to save my life. And I was incredibly anxious. Like, I just felt so worried about everything constantly. And that was within like 2 days of starting the medicine. I also got a little bit nauseous and I had a really bad headache. Those are all fairly classic signs and symptoms. Some people get like diarrhea. I didn't get that, thank goodness. And that was kind of like the first week. It was not fun. And I really, really wanted to just stop taking it. And then I kind of remembered, and that was another moment where I thought, like, I always tell my, get like in my head, you know, when people are like, I take it for 4 days and then I stopped. And I'm like, you should have just kept going. It gets better. I had to like do that to myself. I'm like, I'm gonna stop. And I was like, no, self, like, imagine sitting there in your office and being like, no, self, like, just keep going. So I kept going. And we are currently on day like 7. And The anxiety is still definitely up. It's a little bit better. I would say it's back to baseline from where I've started. So last week was really, really horrible. And this week I'm back to just being like the anxiousness that made me take it originally, which was still quite bad. So if I seem, like I said, just jumbled, it's just like I'm having a trouble just like thinking straight. That's where we are with that. But interestingly, in the last like 3 days, this is really like the menopause. I feel like symptoms have come in because I am irritable, like really irritable. I am also having like hot flashes and sweating a lot, and I just feel very hot. Did I mention irritable? Everyone send Joe all of your good thoughts. And that's where we are now. So I usually, this like, you start to feel better within like 2 weeks, not like better anxiety wise, but like a lot of the symptoms go away. My headaches have gotten better. I am very rarely nauseous. Every now and then I am, but overall it's okay. I did take 25 milligrams the first week, and now I'm up to like 50. So I'm wondering if that's like what caused all the hot flashes and stuff. And because you always should like start at kind of a lower dose and then go up. And that's where I think we're gonna sit for right now, is at 50. But yeah, so I will keep you all posted on how this goes. I am sure that it worked really, really well when I took it for depression, with postpartum depression. So I am anticipating that it will one day help with the anxiety and help me like just like cope a little bit better. I have hope. But that is, I think, the whole update on that. Thanks for coming to my, I said it wasn't gonna be long, and then watch me sit here and talk about this for like 20 something minutes. I apologize. That's that. Next week we should be back to our regular programming. I know this isn't our usual vlog, but I just couldn't, like I said, I couldn't put that out in the world because I was like, no, that's like, no one needs to, it didn't make any sense. I was watching it back, I'm like, Liz, what are you talking about? So hopefully this made a little bit more sense and it was a little bit more coherent, and maybe it made you feel less alone if you're dealing with it. And if not, it maybe gave you some perspective of kind of what the process is like. I don't know. I don't have anything there, but thanks for hanging out this week, guys. If you have had any similar experiences, feel free to leave them in the comments below, but you certainly do not have to. That would be more of just to let other people know, like, hey, you're not alone there, friend, because I feel like all of you always get a lot from that. And yeah, we're all gonna be fine. I really am fine. This isn't, like I said, I was hesitant. The only reason I was hesitant to post this was because I was like, I don't want people to think that I'm putting it out there to be like, oh, look at me. Like, this is going to be so manageable and it's going to be just fine. And compared to so many other things I see, like, this is just absolutely nothing. Not to say like, I'm not trying to minimize my experience, but you know what I mean? Like, this is going to be very manageable. I was literally just trying to talk about it more because no one talks about it and everyone yogas their way out of it on the internet. And this is not yoga outable, okay? You are not going to be able to Shavasana this. Maybe it'll help. I'm actually about to go do some yoga to try to Shavasana some of the stress away, but you get what I mean. Thanks for being here, guys. I hope that, like I said, it helped at least a couple of you. You are not alone. If you are dealing with something like this, please, please, please reach out to your healthcare provider. It is nothing to be ashamed of. It is a chemical imbalance, and it is okay if you need a little bit of help, especially right now. Actually, just whenever, not just especially right now, absolutely whenever. You know, it's okay. You're not alone, and it can be better. I know sometimes it's hard to imagine it being better, but I promise it can be better, and it will. You will be okay. You can do hard things. This is just sometimes one of those hard things. Hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. Thanks for listening to my rambles again, and I will see you next Saturday with a normal vlog, or Tuesday. Actually on Tuesday. Tuesday's definitely before next Saturday. All right, bye guys.